Let's see. Okay, here we go. So good morning to all of you in Portland. Yay, it's so great to see everyone. Yay. It's lovely to be with you this morning here in Ohio, in central Ohio. It is extremely bright and sunny, which we're not used to because in the winter, because we are south of the Great Lakes, some of the largest freshwater in the lakes in the world. That's the collection of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. Because we're up here near Lake Erie, we get lake effect clouds during winter. And so whenever that strange light appears in the sky, people are not quite sure what to do, but they usually get out and run around. So, so there's a bunch of us out running around today because it's supposed to cloud up again tomorrow. Out my window, I can see the bustling interchange of two major United States highways. Interstate 71 runs north and south through Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And this is the part where it runs through Columbus. And Interstate 70, which is the main east-west artery that runs from Denver to heaven only knows where on the East Coast. Interstate 70 is going this way. So we're at this major intersection, which is why I think Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was so happy when we bought this property, because we're right in downtown Columbus, about 1.5 miles from the center of town, and literally the center of town. And so it's really kind of interesting that when our building burned down in 2016, Rinpoche, when we asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, well, we're feeling kind of depressed, because we did not plan on an arson fire burning down our building. And he said, don't be sad, just rebuild it. And so 7 years later, here we are in the new building. So I'm in my office and I've got this lovely view of the intersection of 70 and 71, very, very impressive, as well as the one of the three 15-foot prayer flags in the rear of our building that can be seen from the freeway. So we're trying to do some Dharma in downtown Columbus by flying these prayer flags. They're 15 footers, the vertical ones in the back of the building. And then on top of the building, near the rear of the building, is the Karmapa's dream flag. Flying from the top of the building in a very stiff west breeze today. So it's a great day. Downstairs in our Dharma Center, right now, there's a group of about 3 or 4 people working on mantra rolls to put into our statues, which have been delivered and are sitting in their crates from Nepal in the corner of our community room. The boxes are surrounded by caution tape. But sometime in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll be filling these statues with the help of Lama Tashi Dundup and other lamas. And they have us making these rolls of mantras to go inside the statues. It's really quite impressive. And I might, if I get a chance to, I might be able to show you some stuff later. And then over in the shrine room, which is on the same level as I'm on, they are doing a shamatha retreat right now. So they're doing quiet sitting meditation just a few steps away in another room. So this is what I had always imagined and hoped for this property, that we would be able to come back and offer things. And 3 people walked in the front door today who had never been here before for the meditation thing, said, hey, I saw it on all events, or hey, I saw it in Eventbrite, and I just thought I'd show up. So it's fun, it's fun to, welcome people who've never had any connection to Buddhism before. So anyway, we'll go ahead and start where we left off yesterday in our discussion of the medicine Buddha, the sadhana. And before we start, I know you already have at your own place there done some prayers of taking refuge and so forth, but I'm going to recite just a very simple prayer of taking refuge. And if you can join in your heart and your mind, dedicating this session of study to all sentient beings and praying that all beings are free from suffering. Let's see here. Okay. Oi sanje judong soji chonam la chanchu badu dani chepsu je daji jinsu ji pe sonam je trola penchir sanje dru parsho semjen tamje dewa tan tewe gyutan den par gyuchi dunga tan dunyaki gyutan drewa juchi dunya mebe tewa dampa tam and drewa juchi nerin chandan yidan drewe tanyen chimpola nepa chik Palin Sawelam Harim Poche Tagi Chiwar Pede Den Shula Kadun Jembo Gone Jason Te Kusun Tugging a Drip Saldu. Okay, thanks everyone. Yesterday, we started our conversation about the medicine Buddha practice by talking a little bit about the three types of practice that's taught in Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, one of the translators said instead of calling it Vajrayana Buddhism, we should call it Three-yana Buddhism. And because the Tibetan tradition includes the practices of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so the Buddha Shakyamuni taught for 45 years. And during that time, he gave extensive teachings in a very graded way, giving very easily accessible teachings, followed by more complex teachings, and then finally the most complex teachings. Later, scholars began dividing them in different ways. The Buddha didn't start a lecture saying, today I will talk about this, or today I will talk about that. He just taught, and afterwards scholars have categorized his writings. And one of the many ways of categorizing the Buddha's teachings is through these first turning of the wheel teachings, second turning of the wheel teachings, and third turning of the wheel teachings. But an easy way of talking about these is to use the word yana, Y-A-N-A, yana, which means vehicle or path. The Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. The Hinayana are the earliest teachings of the Buddha about ethics, morality, and meditation. It's associated with the very earliest teachings that the Buddha gave. The Mahayana is in the second group of teachings that the Buddha gave. It builds upon the ethics, morality, and meditation of the Hinayana and increases and expands the motivation of the practitioner. The Hinayana is sometimes called the vehicle of individual liberation because it's for people who see the sufferings of this world, the suffering of this world that the Buddha called samsara, and that they see the sufferings of the world and they want to escape samsara themselves on their own. So sometimes the Hinayana is called the vehicle of individual liberation. The Mahayana is called sometimes the larger vehicle. Hinayana is the smaller vehicle because the motivation for practicing it is to benefit and liberate oneself. The Mahayana is sometimes called the larger vehicle because it's for the liberation of oneself and all sentient beings. This larger motivation increases the benefit that one can accomplish. And it also increases the group of people that one can benefit. And then finally, the Vajrayana. Vajra means indestructible. And it refers sometimes, it's sometimes translated as diamond, because a diamond is the hardest known material at that time. And it is used to cut other diamonds. And so the reason that it's called the indestructible vehicle, or the Vajrayana, is because it works with our indestructible inner Buddha nature. And through the practices of the path of liberation, which is deep penetrating insight meditation, such as the ones done in Mahamudra, such as the practices of Mahamudra, the practices of Dzogchen, the practices of the Great Middle Way. This deep penetrating insight helps us to recognize our Buddha nature and bring it to fruition. But the other path of the Vajrayana that we talked about last night was the path of skillful means, which includes all of the practices of yogic discipline, including mantra practice. So we talked a little bit about how we begin with shamatha meditation in our Dharma practice, which helps to calm the mind and helps us to understand ethics, morality, and mindfulness. Then we practice Tonglen, compassion meditation, to increase our motivation for practice, to take on the Mahayana motivation of the Bodhisattva, and to learn bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, citta means mind. And so by practicing bodhicitta, we expand our practice and our study to include all sentient beings. And then finally, in the Vajrayana, we study what you might call the quick path of achieving enlightenment through the practice of the path of liberation and the path of skillful means. So that's just a little bit about what we talked about yesterday. The other thing we spoke about yesterday was the teachings that I've received from the previous Kalu Rinpoche on how confusion arises in our mind. We talked about the four veils that arise when we do not experience recognition of mind's nature. Remember, we were talking about mind being in one of two modes: wisdom mode, when it recognizes its own nature, and confusion mode, when it doesn't recognize its own nature. And how confusion mode, through ignorance, habitual tendencies, kleshas or mental afflictions, and karmic accumulations, these four veils cover our Buddha nature so that we are not able to see it. And that the function, we spoke last night, that the function of all of these practices, whether it's the shamatha we practice at first, the compassion or Tonglen meditation we practice second, or the Mahamudra and mantra practices that we practice third. These three yanas of meditation and practice, they help to dispel these four veils. They help to purify our negative karma. They help to dispel our mental afflictions. They help reverse our habitual tendencies, and eventually they help us to overcome ignorance itself. And so that was a brief discussion of last night. One other thing we covered was about the teachings that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, my teacher, gave about practices like the medicine Buddha. He said, because we're sort of confused, ordinary human beings, we think you need one Buddha for wisdom, one Buddha for compassion, one Buddha for healing, one Buddha for purification, and so forth. But his statement to me was that accomplishing one deity accomplishes all deities. In other words, practicing one in one's life is sufficient. And so all of these different deities have the power to purify. All these deities have the power to remove obstacles. All of these deities have the power to nurture wisdom and compassion. And so I spoke about Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's statements regarding the medicine Buddha practice, that it was such a powerful method for purifying negativity, purifying negative karma, and ripening wisdom, that he recommended it to everyone. He said, you don't really even need an empowerment to do this practice. And so he was quite generous with how he shared it with everyone. And the medicine Buddha in particular is a powerful practice of purification and healing. And so we talked a little bit last night during the questions and answers about this book, Medicine Buddha Teachings by Trungpa Rinpoche. And in the book Medicine Buddha Teachings, he talks about the aspirations of the medicine Buddha, who, when he was just a bodhisattva aspiring to become a Buddha, he said, when I become a Buddha, may even just the sound of my name purify wrongs and heal illness. And therefore, when he became an enlightened being, that aspiration came true. So I think that's pretty much what I covered yesterday. And I promised that I would cover one additional thing this morning before we started. And that was a little bit about the purification of karma. Because I'm a little bit concerned about not covering the right amount of material this morning, I want to apologize for not stopping for questions. Right now, I'm going to work through the presentation on purification. And after that, I'm going to begin the presentation on the medicine Buddha. And I want to make sure I get through the whole sadhana. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just keep the question period short today, and so that we can conclude at 11:30 Eastern time. So, this afternoon, I have a feeling there will be more time for questions. So you can either type your questions into chat or write them down. You can type questions into chat at any time. I just won't answer them right then. But feel welcome to type them into chat or write them down. And then when the question period comes, you'll be in good shape. All right. So one of the things I mentioned last night was that some illnesses are said to be the result of negative karma. And as such, we all, of course, want to know how we as ordinary human beings can purify our negative karma. Number one, is it possible? And so forth and so on. And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche quoted, he gave a statement once. He said, there's only one good thing about bad karma. And he said that bad karma, that one good thing about bad karma is that bad karma can be purified. And I think that it's pretty easy to see how this is possible. Remember yesterday we were talking about the mind being in one of two modes, wisdom mode or confusion mode. When mind is in wisdom mode, the negativities in that mind have been dispelled. So we are all looking forward to the day when we accomplish what is called the first level or first bhumi of bodhisattva awakening, when we get to purify eons of negative karma all at once. Until that day, we need to work in the relative world with the relative means of dispelling and purifying wrong. And there's a couple of teachings about this, and whether or not it's a good idea to put these two together, I'm not sure. But I think by putting them together and showing these two teachings, I think it helps people to see both how karma is accumulated and then how that karma is removed. How negative karma gets implanted in our mind stream and then how it's purified. So those of you who are familiar with Trungpa Rinpoche's book on the 12 links of interdependent origination, it's a book that I keep reading and I keep hoping I will fully understand it someday. But it explains how we experience the world through our senses and how the 8 consciousnesses work together. Our 5 sense consciousnesses, our 6th consciousness, which is thinking, and our 7th consciousness, which is the felt sense of I or me, how all of these work together and make it and implant karmic accumulation or karmic impressions on our 8th consciousness, which is sometimes called the storehouse consciousness, because it's where all of these karmic impressions are stored. So, he talks about this in detail. I can't say I fully understand it, but I appreciate the fact that that he explains it so well. At the end of the book, he gives a short teaching called The 4 Parts of an action as a way of illustrating how karma is implanted in our mind stream. So I'm going to share that teaching with you now on the little, I'm creating my own artificial whiteboard here. With talking about the 4 powers of purification and the 4 parts of an action. The 4 powers of purification that are taught in the Mahayana mind training are powerful tools for purifying negative karma, but how do they work? And says, although I've never heard a point-for-point comparison from a Kaju lineage master or scholar, I have found it interesting to compare the 4 powers of confession and purification with the 4 parts of an action taught by Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche in his book, The 12 Links of Interdependence. The 4 parts of an action are forming the intention to perform an action, purposefully initiating the action, purposefully completing it, and then rejoicing in the action thus completed. So in this illustration, I often use the example of mosquitoes because virtually no one loves mosquitoes. I don't think there's a single person who loves mosquitoes. And so their first tendency when they see a mosquito is to want to swat it and kill it. Unless, of course, you're the Dalai Lama, who says that he tries to be patient with mosquitoes, but then eventually sometimes he does swat them. Afterwards, he says he does purification practice, which just goes to show he's right with our program. So the intention is, I see a mosquito on my skin. The purposeful, so I must kill this mosquito. So that's the purposeful intention. The purposeful initiation action of the action is lifting one's hand to strike. Now, you could stop there and not complete it. And the karmic severity or the severity of the karmic impression would not be as strong as if you follow through with the purposeful completion of the action and then rejoicing, haha, I got him, So these 4 parts of an action increase the karmic impression that it makes on our mind stream. We form an intention to do a negative action, we begin the negative action, we complete the negative action, and then we rejoice in the negative action. And so that's the teaching that Trungpa Rinpoche gives in the 12 Links book. I just find it incredibly important to share this with people because karma is such it's like a little black box. No one can see inside it. And in fact, the inner workings of karma were not thoroughly and completely explained by the Buddha Shakyamuni. And when I asked my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, to explain it, he illustrated his point by taking off his watch and shaking it at me. He says, it's not a watch. You can't take it apart to see how it works. It just works. So I took that to mean, great question, no answer. So anyway, so what I have learned from this 4 parts of an action is about how through intention, action, and satisfaction, we drive these negative habits home and do them again and again and again. And of course, with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teaching about confession and purification, it shows how taking the 4 powers of confession are taking refuge in and relying on the Buddha as the witness for our confession. Instead of just thinking about ourselves, we think about the Buddha and think about the Buddha's presence. And instead of rejoicing, we're now regretting our action. We recall and regret the action. We then perform a remedy or a practice that helps us to reverse our negative action, and we make a resolution not to repeat the negative action. So reliance, regret, remedy, and resolution are the 4 powers of confession. And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said that he felt that relying on the Buddha was very important, because he said the Buddha actually has escaped from samsara's grip, and therefore is the only real witness for our confession. And because we tend to rejoice in our negative actions, it's very important to regret them. He said your regret should be as strong as your regret would be if you realized that you had accidentally swallowed poison. Very heartfelt from the center of your being. The types of remedies we can do for negative actions range from confession liturgies, such as those found in the prayer to the 35 Buddhas, prayer of confession before the 35 Buddhas, which is also called the 3 heaps, the Sutra of the 3 heaps. And also there's a prayer that's recited as part of the Nyungne called Lama Dorje Zimpa, or Lama Vajra Holder, in which one confesses to one's guru. And then there are practices such as the purification mantra of Vajrasattva, and indeed the medicine Buddha sadhana, which are a remedy for negativity, because Khenpo Rinpoche said, if you feel that the practices you are doing are purifying your negativity, he said they are doing that. He says the effectiveness of these 4 powers depends on you. You are the one who needs to rely on the Buddha as the witness. You are the one that needs to regret the action. You are the one that needs to perform the remedy while thinking of these 4 powers and make the resolution not to repeat it in the future. Somebody asked Khenpo Rinpoche once, well, the person said, I have a short temper, and so I'm always losing my temper, they said. And I am afraid that if I make a resolution not to lose my temper again, that it's a hollow resolution, because I know it's going to happen again. Should I make a resolution anyway, or should I just abandon this 4th power of making resolution? And he said, oh no, you need to make the resolution. It's important. Because he used the example of a teacup. He said, let's say you have a teacup. There's a crack in the bottom of the teacup, but the teacup is still whole. And when you pour the tea mainly remains in the cup. A little bit of it may come out the bottom through the crack, but the majority of the tea stays in the cup. He said that crack in the bottom is your recognition and acknowledgement that you have a habit that will be very difficult to break. He said, your promise is not to break it, is the teacup. He said, so it is better to make a resolution knowing that you won't be able to keep it fully than to not make the resolution at all. He said, for example, if you wouldn't make the resolution at all, he said that would make as much sense as pouring the tea directly on the table. He said, whereas if you make the resolution, this cup is your resolution. So when you pour the tea, majority of tea stays in the cup. But if you don't make the resolution, he said, it makes no sense. It's the same as pouring the tea directly on the table. So that made a lot of sense to me. And I made this kind of silly comparison that of how the 4 powers reverse the 4 parts of an action, that the intention, the selfish intention is reversed by refuge and reliance, and resolution is the initiation, and remedy is the completion, and rejoicing is the regret. I mean, who knows? I'm just making that up. So we're not going to talk any further about that, because it's not informed. But what I find interesting is that there are 4 parts to an action and 4 parts to a purification. Whether there's a point-for-point comparison doesn't matter. The idea is that Khenpo Rinpoche said, if we believe that our confession is of value and is purifying, it will purify. And in fact, he said, you can use anything to purify. You can use your practice of Chenrezig to purify negativity. You can use your practice of Tara or Manjushri or Medicine Buddha. He said, in fact, Medicine Buddha is a very powerful practice of purification. So because I'm going to skip letting us do questions right now. I just want to thank you for letting me include that piece today, even though it's not strictly part of the Medicine Buddha sadhana. I wanted to mention it because I feel the more we can understand about the power of these practices, the better it is for us, because we get an idea of why we practice. We're practicing not to follow just some tradition or some custom, that we're doing these practices because they actually have an impact on our mind stream. Khenpo Rinpoche said that through the practices, these 4 powers of confession, he said even the worst karmic action can be purified. So he said, but it's very important that you feel this and believe in it in yourself, and in your own mind make your practice a remedy. Because I remember Trungpa Rinpoche gave a short talk on this once, where he said, if you, when you sit down to meditate, it's really important that you form a strong desire to actually practice, that you form a strong intention to practice, and that you dedicate your practice toward the liberation of yourself and all beings. He said, and whereas he said, if you sit down and do your practice with just this sort of generalized feeling, like, oh, I guess this is going to be good for me, or whatever, it's not quite as powerful as your practice will be if you dedicate it to the purification of your bad habits, if you do it to purify your negative karma, and to bring wisdom and to bring compassion, because all of these practices will do all of this. You can dedicate your practice to having more compassion. May I have more compassion by doing this practice? May I have more wisdom by doing this practice? And so forth and so on. So it's worthwhile to have this intention. And this is why because we're going to be starting to look at the sadhana now, what we're going to be looking at is the initial supplication. It starts with the initial supplication. I'm going to turn to that page first. And I'm using, by the way, I apologize for using it. If I sent you a text with which you're unfamiliar, I do apologize for that. KTD Monastery has recently produced a new Sanjay Menla or Medicine Buddha text, and I'll be using that as our guide today. This supplication, it was written to enhance the sadhana, which was written, as I mentioned last evening, by Namchu Mingyur Dorje, who lived with his tutor, Karma Chagme Rinpoche, at the time of the 10th Karmapa. Namchu Mingyur Dorje had many visions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, including the Medicine Buddha, and this particular sadhana, which is held to be a treasure, or terma, T-E-R-M-A, a treasure text, a mind treasure, is it's one of the treasures of Namchu Mingyur Dorje. Let me see, the Amitabha Sadhana is another one. In any case, the text, as I read it to you last night, starts with the Mahamudra lineage supplication, as is common to start all Karmakaji practices, with a commemoration of the masters of the lineage and a dedication of our practice to the accomplishment of Mahamudra. The second prayer in this collection is a prayer, a 7-line supplication to Guru Rinpoche. And people may wonder why a supplication to Guru Rinpoche is in this text. And the simple explanation is that I was told by my teachers that because all treasure texts or termas, whoops, sorry me, I took away the, sorry about that. I made it disappear. So I've got to make it reappear. Because all treasure texts are attributed to Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche. Because all of these texts are attributed to Guru Rinpoche, he is invoked at the beginning of all terma sadhana practices. So that's just a little bit about why we do what we do with these practices, why these are first. It begins with a Sanskrit salutation as a nod toward the land of India from which Dharma came. So it's Namo Bhikkhanse Maharajaye, which is, a hail to the king of medicine. And then it starts to talk about the medicine Buddhas themselves. Endowed with an ocean-like treasuries of quality and merit, you calm the torment of suffering living beings endure. With the blessing of your inconceivable compassion, I supplicate you, sapphire light. So that's one of the medicine Buddhas. Those bound by intense greed, yet hearing your name, they are born as humans who delight in generosity. Victorious medicine Buddha, I supplicate you. And so, as you can see, now you see why I wanted to talk about the purification of negative karma before talking about this supplication, because this supplication talks about the power of the medicine Buddha and his retinue to purify all negativity. Those bound by intense greed and so forth, yet hearing your name. Living beings born in hell, yet hearing your name, they are born in higher realms. King of medicine, I supplicate you. Through repeated dissension and slander, deep schisms are created and lives taken in the world. Yet, hearing your name, they no longer can harm. King of medicine, I supplicate you. And then he gives the names of other Buddhas, excellent name, flawless appearance of fine gold, glorious supreme one, free of misery, resounding Dharma melody, king of direct knowledge, king of melody, and king of the Shakyas. All of you, I supplicate. So the Buddha Shakyamuni is considered to be one of the 8 medicine Buddhas. Then the Bodhisattvas are named, Manjushri, Kyabdral, Vajrapani, as just examples of them. And then Brahma, Indra, the 4 kings of the 4 directions, the 12 great chiefs of the Yakshas and others, I supplicate this entire and perfect mandala. The Sutra of the 7 Tathagatas aspirations and the Sutra of the Medicine Buddha, the treatise by the great abbot Shantarakshita and other texts. I supplicate all volumes of the genuine Dharma. Bodhisattva Shantarakshita, Tritsun Dutsen, and others, the scholars, translators, royal ministers, bodhisattvas, and all the genuine lamas who hold the lineage, Choki Wangchuk and others, I supplicate you all. Through the blessing of this supplication, may the many fears and illnesses of this life be pacified. At death, after every fear of a lower rebirth is dispelled, bless us to be reborn in Sukhavati. And so now you get an idea of why I wanted to talk about the purifying aspects of medicine Buddha before discussing this, because it's a really beautiful supplication, supplicating the medicine Buddha and his retinue, his entire retinue, which we will be seeing when we describe the visualization. When we get to the visualization of the practice, all of these beings will be mentioned. And then the small print that explains what happened. because I preciously had the blessing, he said, of receiving from the Lord, the sixth Nirmanakaya, Shamar Kachuwampo, the sadhana of offerings to the seven Tathagatas written by the Lord Drakbodundra, remembering the benefit of hearing the names of these Buddhas, I, Raga Asaya, and that's Karma Chagme himself, made this supplication. So the root text is by Namchu Mingyur Dorje, but he wrote a supplication. His tutor and scribe, Raga Asaya, or Raga Asaya is Chakme, or without attachment, Karma Chakme, that's his Dharma name. So let's see, what time is it? I think I can stop for 10 minutes to do questions if there are some questions. And if not, we'll go into the next part of the text. That was a lot of information. So if anybody has questions, I'll look at chat, and I don't see any in chat right now. Yes, yes, Linda?
It's just a quick question on the four powers of confession. The first one, relying on the Buddha as our witness. Can you say a little bit more about that? Is it like all Buddhas?
Yes, yes. Basically, if I read my favorite explanation of the four powers is the one in Great Path of Awakening by Jamgon Khantrul. And when he talks about it, he said that we rely on the, I'm going to make sure that I get it exactly right. Confession. The force of reliance is taking refuge in the three jewels and arousing bodhicitta. So what that means then for us is that we need to begin our confession by relying upon the Buddha who has transcended this world of suffering and samsara, and rely on him, which I think is really important, because most of the time we are not relying on the Buddha. Instead, we're relying on our own self for everything, or for to make our decisions about this and that. And so for this, we turn to the Buddha and instead rely on the Buddha and say, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And I think that this really would include all beings, all of the awakened beings. But I don't know with specifics there if there's any Buddhas that are to be left out. I just can't imagine an awakened being being left out of the sources of refuge.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Other questions? Other Linda.
Kathy.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, it's Linda. I just wanted to thank you also for your summation of last night's teaching. It was very helpful to hear it again. And so thank you for that. In terms of confession, sometimes I feel like, wow, I could be confessing all the time. And is it appropriate to have like a daily, or would one aspire to maybe having a daily confession? Or is there also like confession at the moment or post-action that can be not quite so formal, but you're like, oh yeah, okay, I did this, I don't want to do it again, that type of thing.
And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Both are the case. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told me that he felt it was very important for people to do some form of confession liturgy every day. There is a very easy one that's given in let me get the modern version of this. There's a very easy one that's in the current edition of Great Path of Awakening at the very back of the book. It's called the 7 branch prayer.
Yeah.
And this 7-branch prayer, it does include a stanza about confession. I confess all evil actions that I have done, influenced by the defilements from time without beginning until now. The 5 actions that ripen immediately, the 10 non-virtuous acts, and many others. And then the next line is, I rejoice in whatever merit has been accumulated. So what I tell people to do is I tell people at the end of their day, as they're getting ready to renew their refuge vow, because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche encouraged his students to renew their refuge vow morning and evening. And so before the evening renewal of the refuge vow, that a person would then look at their day and go over it and say, well, okay, this worked out fine. I rejoice in that good action I did. And oh, this wasn't so good, so I regret that. And I not repeat that again, and so forth. And I like that, because that gives you some accountability for yourself, because really mindfulness is a gift. And it actually allows us to see our actions sometimes for the very first time and see the impact that they have on us as individuals and the negative impact that some of these things have on us. So I feel like a daily confession is really a good idea. That being said, I asked Khenpo Rinpoche the exact same question you asked, which was, what about in the moment? And the answer is absolutely, definitely, you can do that. You can also do it in the moment. I think what he was getting at was like, don't be crazy, but because you can get minutia, you can get like lost in the weeds and get obsessed and, sort of get stuck in the minutia of it, with the minutia of it rather than the idea. But he said, yeah, that's a really good idea, he said, as a matter of fact. Because frequently what I would do when I felt intense regret about something was I would use there's a slogan in Great Path of Awakening, 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. And if I make a mistake out of confusion, I would say, may my mistake contain the mistakes of all beings, and may all beings, including myself, be free from mistakes in the future. And I would do that right in the moment. Other times I would recite a mantra in the moment, as a way of saying, that wasn't so good, I don't want to do that again. So yeah, he said there's room for both. And but what he did say, he said doing them in the moment should not be a replacement for a daily confession. So, and in fact, he said it's really a good idea to recite the 35 Buddhas every day, the prayer of confession before the 35 Buddhas. And I haven't really been able to successfully do it, but I love the advice and I will someday be able to do it, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. It's very
You're
helpful.
welcome. Yeah, thank you. There's time for one more. Is there one more question? Yes. And from the Shrine Room?
That prayer for the 35 Buddha confession, can you direct us to that?
Mm-hmm. Yes. There is you can go to, let's see if I can quickly find it for you. There is a page on the Columbus KTC website where you can download it. Stand by. Let's see here. Who we are, support, donors, news, programs. It's under online programs. It's not the easiest to navigate to. Dharma text downloads. Woohoo! Okay, here we go. This will take a second.
Maybe Latsawa House might have it too.
Oh yeah, they'll definitely have it. Latsawa House definitely has it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. I do appreciate that. I wanted a quick download, but yes, Latsawa House will have it for sure. They might call it the 3 Skanda Sutra, 3 skandhas or 3 heaps. And I see my copy of it is really old and hard to read, but the copy we have posted on our website is not easy to read, but I'll put the link in the chat for you in case. It's the old 1970s vintage room tech edition of the Prayer to the 35 Buddhas, but not easy to read. But definitely, yeah, I go to Lotsawa House, and there's also one in the Menla prayer book. The Kagyu Menla prayer book. There's a translation there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, that didn't take up very much time, so there's time for one more. Is there one more? I can't. Yes. Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of actions we do every day that aren't super harmful, but are any pleasure seeking is born from desire and attachment. Is that fair to say? That's still
That is fair to say.
negative karma,
That's
not
fair.
negative karma, but negative enough. But I'm thinking of examples of really just craving a good meal, or want to watch something funny on television, or you wouldn't confess those things because unless you really make a resolution not to do it again.
Yeah. See, that's really true, because they don't rise to the level, pleasure seeking doesn't necessarily rise to the level of negative action. It's not one of the, you could like stretch, the 10 non-virtuous action, and 10 non-virtuous actions when they talk about idle chatter and gossip and stuff like that, but an entertainment is not listed there. And so how I tend to work with the craving for things is I try to mindfully watch. I try to watch my mind when I'm involved in watching an entertainment. And I don't always have the capacity to watch my mind. Good and great Mahamudra practitioners can watch their mind no matter what they're doing, but I'm not like that. I get lost in the fun of doing fun things. And in fact, Situ Rinpoche said, we're human beings, we need recreation. So he said, recreation is important. It's important to be a human being. You have to have recreation. And he said, he said, you can take anything too far. But he said it's, so he actually felt that art and entertainment were not necessarily anything wrong. But yes, if you engage in what I would call mindless enjoyment, where you get lost in it completely, and you're not watching your mind, then lots of stuff can happen, so it's like it's increasing your craving for those things. So what you can do instead is use the practices of mind training to temper and to work with your spirit, your sort of spirit of intoxication that happens sometimes when we're enjoying something. And where we can say, oh, that's really cute. Watch me do that. That's fun. That's funny. I'm really clinging to that thing. Okay, that's amusing. May all beings be free of clinging. So you don't have to you don't have to be obsessed about it. But it is nice to be clear-headed and to see that mindless enjoyment does increase craving. But if you can couch enjoyment in terms of like, wow, may everyone have delicious food like this. May everyone have inspirational feelings like this. May everyone join in this feeling of happiness that I have. That in those kinds of ways, we can actually use our enjoyment as a catalyst for waking up. Does that make sense? I have a friend who's a chef. And so she loves food, right? So she's a chef. And every time she sits down to eat, she always says this sort of litany of thanks, thanks for this, thanks for this. And then she says, may all beings have happiness, may all beings have food and safety and love. I just think it's a lovely thing where she just makes sure that before she enjoys her meal, she thinks about all beings. So I appreciate that question. Okay, well, we're going to segue into the sadhana then. So yeah, I'm sorry if you have an additional question. I'm sorry I can't take it right this minute, but do definitely write it down and we'll try and get to it this afternoon. I'm going to now share the screen and show you the sadhana. Let's see. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that just yet. Am I going to do that? Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this other one first. I'm going to take a quick look at the outline. Remember I told you yesterday that Kathy Lama Jackson, who happens to be here. In fact, I almost invited her to come and say hi to everybody. She's downstairs doing mantra rolling. These were her study notes. The text pages are for an older edition, so they're not going to be useful for you. This supplication that we just read, she gives a little outline of the sadhana, of the supplication and who all of these. She doesn't name all the Buddhas, but she just talks about them there. Refuge in bodhicitta is the first part of the sadhana, and we'll be looking at it first. The function of refuge is to prevent your practice from becoming an incorrect path. In other words, by taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha at the beginning of every Buddhist practice, we reorient all of the practice that we're going to do and dedicate it toward awakening. This is the function of the refuge prayer. The bodhicitta prayer prevents our practice from becoming an inferior path. So incorrect path means something that we're doing for ourselves, just for us. That's an incorrect path. A correct path is a path that leads us to Buddhahood. And so taking refuge at the beginning helps us to avoid the incorrect path. There are 3 jewels of refuge, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then there are called the 3 uncommon refuges, or the 3 roots, the Lama as the root of blessing, the Yidam as the root of accomplishment, and the protector as the root of all Dharma activity. And so these are sometimes, the 3 jewels are called the Sutrayana, from the sutras, the Buddha's initial teachings, and then the 3 roots are the Vajrayana refuge. So that's who is mentioned in the refuge prayer. After this, there's a prayer called of blessing and consecrating the offerings and the location. When you are doing this practice in a group, the shrine attendant will go up to the shrine and sprinkle the 8 offering bowls with water as a way of or amrita, I forget which, but they sprinkle the bowls as a way of consecrating them and saying we dedicate these to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then after dedicating the offerings, we imagine that the place of practice is a completely pure realm filled with offering mandalas made of inexhaustible substances that have always been present. Then the purpose of this blessing and consecration is to readjust our impure perception and our attitude toward ourselves, toward others, and toward the environment. In other words, we uplift our view of ourselves, we uplift the view of the environment, and think of it as being a pure realm as a way of getting ready for the medicine Buddha practice. So you'll see that reflected in, let's see here, the opening, there we go. In the opening prayer. Let's see. My husband makes fun of me because I have many too many windows open all at once. So he's right. I have many too many windows open all at once. There it is. This should be the sadhana. Nope, that's not it. Well, that's supposed to be it. So I'm not there yet. Sadhana, sadhana, sadhana. There it is. At the beginning, Ragasaya or Karma Chakme gives a short salutation and a short introduction. He says, Namo Bekanzaya, meaning, hail to the king of medicine. If they are available, he says, arrange in front of a medicine Buddha, tanka, or image, as many peaceful offerings as you can, such as a mandala or other offerings. So this is describing how the shrine should look. And if you have the capacity to put out the 8 offering bowls and fill one of those 3-tiered mandalas with rice as an offering, that's great. But he says if they're not available, it is enough to make mental offerings while imagining the front visualization in the sky. Nothing else is needed. Since this belongs to the Anuttara or Anuttara tradition, the practitioner need not refrain from meat or alcohol or perform the rituals of purification, such as the taking of pure blessing water, the blessing of pure water. Those of you who have participated in strict rituals, such as the Nyongne, know that it's important for one to wash one's hands and face and so forth before beginning practice. And then to enter the shrine room, make your bows, go up to the chant leader's table, and then pure water is placed in your mouth, in your hand to put in your mouth to rinse with, to prepare yourself for the practice of the sadhana. But he said, these are not necessary. And the reason he said these are not necessary is that they're from the non-dual Tantra tradition. And so it is only in the lower tantras where this type of purification is important. For the rest of us, it's important to have a pure mind. Karma Chagme is saying it is, however, definitely necessary to receive the empowerment and reading transmission for this practice because it belongs to the Anuttara tradition. We did the reading transmission last evening. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche has said it's fine to do this without empowerment because it has such great benefit and that empowerments are so rare these days. Karma Chagme writes, since it belongs to the Nyingma tradition, meaning that it is from a treasured text said to be ultimately authored by Guru Rinpoche, the self and front visualizations are emanated simultaneously. And that's a feature of treasure text practices. And I can't say more about that right now. Let's see, it is not necessary to create them separately, as it is a chanted meditation of the Nyingma. Your mind should meditate on the meaning of the words. In other words, try to be with what you're reading. And it begins with refuge and bodhicitta. Remember what the outline said? Namo kunchuk sumdam sawasum kyapne namla kyapsuchi drokun sanje laguchir janchub chotu semke do, which is recited 3 times. I go for refuge, the 3 jewels and the 3 roots, the sources of refuge, in order to establish all beings in Buddhahood. I generate a mind of supreme awakening. So that's refuge and bodhicitta. According to my notes, there is no specific visualization that accompanies this. The next statement, remember, is the blessing of the offerings and the blessing of the place of practice. And then it says, from the expanse of primordial purity, it's kada lone chulpayi namsa gangwe chupe trin mandal jiao si lamorche seme gyurchik pudzaho. So these 4 lines, from the expanse of primordial purity, a cloud of offerings, including mandalas, the articles of royalty, made by offering goddesses, filling the earth and the sky is emanated, may it be inexhaustible pudzaho. In group rituals, sometimes music would be played here. And so we then invoke the purity of the place and the goodness of the offerings, and imagine that offerings are everywhere. Then we make another statement that of bodhisattva intention. May all beings drokun de den now draw daily nyame tang nyom shok. So that is, may all beings be happy and without suffering. May they abide in unimpaired happiness and in equanimity. Then we recite a mantra that establishes the purity of our environment. Om Swabhava Shuddha Sarvadharma Swabhava Shuddha Hong, followed by the term Tompa Ni Dujur, everything becomes emptiness. So I'm going to take a moment to go back to the outline because the outline talks about what happens next. Let's see. Yeah, I can see I should clean this up for next time. Because these aren't easy to find. Here it is. The four immeasurables are mentioned in those two lines about the bodhisattva motivation. And this provides the point of view for us to do the Sanjay Menla or Medicine Buddha practice. May all beings possess the happiness of well-being and the causes of well-being. May they be free from sickness and the cause of sickness. We rejoice in the well-being of others and generate aspirations for all beings without exception. So the visualization stage or generation stage begins, there are two stages to a mantra meditation: the generation stage where the visualization is created, and the completion stage, which happens after it is dissolved. And so to prepare for the visualization of self in frontal as Medicine Buddha, we say the mantra Om Swabhava, which means not only are all things pure in their nature, but that they are in and of themselves the very embodiment of that purity. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche gave a different translation. He said, all things are pure in essence, and so am I. And so am I. It's a reminder of the basic empty and pure nature of all things. And Rinpoche, Trungpa Rinpoche in his book says that when we purify our perception of the entire world, with this mantra, we purify our perception of the entire world, including our own body and mind. This mantra is a statement as to why the path can lead to the result. I remember in one of Trungpa Rinpoche's other books, he said it was the one we studied last month, the third Karmapa's aspiration to attain Mahamudra. He said there are some aspirations that can come true and some aspirations that can't come true. Remember, he said an aspiration that can't come true is, may a flower grow on this table, because there's no cause. There's no way for a flower to grow on this table. And whereas if we say, may I attain Buddhahood, now there is a potential for that to come true because we have Buddha nature. So this Om Swabhava mantra is a statement in which we purify our perception of everything. Because right now we perceive everything as being solid and real, permanent and unchanging. And because of that misapprehension or misperception, we form all kinds of illusion and delusion and cling to things. And so in that way, this purifies our tendencies to cling to self and to phenomena by saying Om Swabhava Shuddha Sarvadharma Swabhava Shuddha Hum. We're reminding ourselves of the purity of all things, the pure empty nature of all things, and the pure empty nature of our own mind. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche warns against us thinking that it's a form of saying abracadabra, everything's emptiness. He says it's not like that. It's a reminder of to practice pure perception. Following this mantra, we visualize that all impure appearances of the world, meaning everything in the world, dissolves into emptiness. And from within that emptiness, the realm and palace of the Medicine Buddha emerges instantly. Visualize two palaces, one palace in front of you and one in the center of which you will sit, because you're going to be Medicine Buddha instantly, and Medicine Buddha will instantly be in front of you. There is, you can imagine this palace is a, you can see it as being like the palaces you see depicted in sand mandalas, having four sides, a roof, and a canopy, and so forth. And you can imagine that inside that palace, which is completely made of light, is a lotus and moon disk. But in front of you, there is the palace is quite elaborate. And in fact, it's much more elaborate. The palace in front of you is, and slightly above you, is the residence for the front visualization and the Medicine Buddha and his entourage. And then Trungpa Rinpoche differentiates between the palace that you are inside as Medicine Buddha. In the center of this palace is a throne of golden jewels upheld by 8 snow lions, 2 on each corner, that represents the fearlessness of Buddhahood. And so your palace is very nice. Don't get me wrong, it's very nice. But the one in front of you is even more grand because it is in the center of a 16-petaled lotus. And its center is an 8-petaled lotus. And in the center of that is another lion throne, another fully open lotus, and a moon disk seat. So in this way, and by the way, those of you who are following in the book, you will find this starting on page 27 of Medicine Buddha Teachings. And this is the way Trungpa Rinpoche describes the visualization. He said, now within this, he said, think of that all impure appearances dissolve into emptiness. And from within that emptiness, the realm and palace of the Medicine Buddha emerge. Now, when you imagine the palace in which you are practicing, the place in which you are practicing has become the realm and palace of the Medicine Buddha, you don't limit this consideration to this world or this planet. As it says in the liturgy, it is the entire billion worlds of the larger world system or galaxy. He says there are 2 ways you can do this practice. The simplest way is to visualize yourself as the Medicine Buddha instantly. But the more elaborate way, which is indicated in the liturgy that we're going to be reading, is also to visualize the Medicine Buddha surrounded by his retinue present in front of you as well. It's easier for beginners to do the self-visualization alone. On the other hand, doing the front visualization as well gives one the opportunity to gather the accumulation of merit. In either case, in the midst of the realm of the Medicine Buddha, which you have visualized as emerging from the expansive emptiness, there is a palace. The palace is square, quite symmetrical. In the center of each of the four sides is a large gateway, each forming an entry into the palace. If you're doing the practice with both self and front visualizations, you need to visualize two palaces, one in the center of which you will sit as the self visualization, and one in front of you and somewhat elevated, which will serve as the residence for the front visualization. Then the prayer text says, let's see, I'm going to have to toggle between these two. This will be interesting. We'll have to see if let's see if I can manage the technology involved here. If I can, great. If I can't, well, there you go. Okay, let's see if that happens. Let's see. Technology, we love it. I'm looking the reason I'm having trouble is because I have a huge glare on my screen and I'm trying to see the screen and read very tiny print, which apparently I cannot do. Too bad. Okay, well, we will have to rely on something else for the text at the moment. It says, the text says, on lion thrones, each with a lotus and moon disk on top, appear deep blue hongs, the seed syllable of myself and the main figure visualized in front. And so the seed syllable hong, which I will get the description of and show you a picture of at the beginning of the second session today. You see it as being in deep blue in color and made of light and standing up. Now, you may say, well, I can't visualize Tibetan letters. I don't know anything about Tibetan alphabet. We have good news for you, and that is that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche has said on more than one occasion that if Tibetan letters are difficult for you to visualize, you can merely visualize a sphere made of deep blue light. And imagine that sphere of deep blue light is the seed syllable hong. So what you would visualize around yourself is this symmetrical palace, inside of which is this golden throne upheld by lions, on top of which is the lotus flower, on top of which is a moon disk, on top of which is a blue sphere that stands for the seed syllable hong. And so that would be how you would do it. Also, you could imagine a palace in front of you. And inside that palace, on top of the throne, a fully open lotus flower, on top of which is lying flat a moon disk, on top of which you will be visualized, let's see, in the center of the palace in the front visualization. It's a lot fancier throne. In the center of the palace, in the front visualization, you visualize a 16-petaled lotus, in the center of which you visualize an 8-petaled lotus. So they're stacked one on top of the other. And you'll find out why in a minute. In the center of the 8-petaled lotus, you visualize another lion throne, lotus, moon, and moon disk seed, as in the self-visualization. There are 8 and 16-petaled lotuses in the front, because there will be additional Buddhas and Bodhisattvas resting on those petals. And then he says, next, on top of the moon discs, in both the front and self-visualizations, you visualize the blue syllable hum. The blue syllable hum, or the blue sphere of light, on top of the moon disc in the self-visualization, represents the essence of the mind or wisdom of the self-visualization deity, and the blue hong on top of the moon disk in the front represents the essence of the mind or wisdom of the front visualization deity. This particular syllable hum is used because hum is the sound of dharmata, the expression of the sound of the nature of mind itself. It is blue because that's the color of the deity that will emerge from him. Having visualized these syllables, both one where you are and one in front of you, you then visualize that innumerable rays of light radiate from each of these syllables simultaneously. On the end of each ray of light are offering goddesses holding various offering substances, which they present to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all directions throughout space. They receive these offerings, and as a consequence, their non-conceptual compassion is awakened, which manifests as their blessings rays coming back in the form of rays of blue light, which dissolve back into the home. Rays of light, which went out bearing offerings, are reabsorbed back into the seed syllable that you are and the seed syllable that's in front. And then rays of light come outward from them again, purifying the entire world of any kind of suffering or difficulty. Then the light rays are reabsorbed again into their respective home. At that moment, the syllables instantly and simultaneously transform into the medicine Buddha. Those of you who have learned the Chenrezi sadhana will recognize this process. It begins with Om Swabhava Shuddha Sarva Dharma Swabhava Shuddha Hom, where we purify our perception of everything, the entire world, into emptiness. From within that emptiness, we imagine that both where we are sitting and in front of us, palaces emerge. The palaces of Medicine Buddha emerge, both where we are and in front of us. They're made entirely of light. You can see through them. And in the center of each of these palaces is a lotus flower. In the self-visualization, there's only a simple 8-petaled lotus, on top of which is a moon disk sitting like a cushion, on top of which is a blue syllable hung or a blue sphere symbolizing the Medicine Buddha's wisdom mind, which actually is also the nature of your mind. In front of you, the palace is looking very much similar, but inside the throne is much more elaborate, with a 16-petaled lotus on top of which is an 8-petaled lotus, on top of which is a lion throne with another lotus and moon disk, on top of which is another hum or blue sphere. What happens next is that lights go out from these hum syllables, and they do two things. They make offerings to those above, and they offer compassion to those below. That's a simple way of saying what the lights are doing. Offerings to those above means that when the lights first go out from the hum syllable where you are sitting and the hum syllable in front of you, they go to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and make offerings and bring back their blessings to the hum syllable or to the small blue sphere where you are, and also where the Medicine Buddha will be in front of you. The second time lights go out, they go to all 6 realms of samsara, where they assuage the suffering of sentient beings and bring them happiness, joy, and purification. And then all of the light, and this also happens from the front visualization as well, that all sentient beings of the 6 realms are benefited by the light. And then the lights are withdrawn back into the hum syllable, and the hum then instantly becomes the Medicine Buddha. Now you can skip this step of sending out lights to the enlightened ones to make offerings and sending lights to all 6 realms to benefit suffering beings. But I kind of like it because in a way, this is a way of enacting Buddha activity and relating to ourselves in a sort of higher way, as a potential bodhisattva who can benefit beings. And in fact, if you read Trungpa Rinpoche's commentary on Jamgon Khantrul's book, Creation and Completion, Jamgon Khantrul says that this little episode where a seed syllable will give off light rays that make offerings, which will then return to the seed syllable. And then the seed syllable gives off light rays that assuage the suffering of beings. And those light rays come back to the seed syllable, is a way of reenacting our birth. If you think about it, this is so, because all of us grew from a very small celled organism into a child that was then born and became the body we have now. But we all began as just a little clump of cells in which our mind was drawn from the bardo into that clump of cells that became us. And we were born in this confused and diluted form in this confused and diluted world. And so when we do a deity practice, we essentially get a cosmic do-over, because we get the chance to redo our conception, as it were, by using the seed syllable as our self-identity, this small seed syllable, and that we are going to reenact our birth in a pure way from our pure nature, making offerings to the Buddhas, and then sending purifying and comforting light rays to all beings. And then those light rays returning, and then we arise as the medicine Buddha from that seed syllable. So that's a little bit of the background as to why this elaborate description is included in this practice, because every chance we get, we have to try to exchange what is negative for something that's positive. So we take our confused and diluted idea of who we think we are, we imagine that it dissolves into emptiness, and that from that pure emptiness, we arise in a pure form, beginning as the palace and the 8-petaled lotus and the lion throne and the lotus and the moon disk and the home syllable that then enacts activity and so on. And in this way, we get sort of a cosmic karmic do-over, and we can then see ourselves momentarily as the medicine Buddha. And so hopefully that's a little bit helpful. And someone's asking me if I can send the outline. Yes, I really apologize, because it was one of those things where I had the outline and I thought I had sent it ahead. I thought so hard that I had sent both the text and the outline ahead, and apparently I didn't do it. So I thought it real hard, but I didn't do it. So I will try to take care of that during the lunch break. I'll send it to everyone. I'll send a link to both of those to everyone. Now, I am sorry we don't get to have more questions now. But when we start this afternoon, I will review this part, because I know it's a little confusing, because we're used to just plopping down on our seats and practicing. But there's a little bit of a preamble here, isn't there, where we imagine that all things become emptiness, and from within that appears the palace, inside of which is the lotus, and inside of which is the lion throne and the lotus and the moon and the seed syllable. It's a little complicated. People ask me sometimes, why do mantra practices have to be so complicated? And I say, well, have you tried working with a smartphone? Have you ever opened an app on a smartphone and had to walk through and figure out how it works? Have you ever played a game that's kind of complicated? Have you ever watched a mystery story or a thriller on television and tried to figure out the plot? Human beings create complexity. We have brains that can work with complexity and that can make complexity. And so it stands to reason that the fact that we can enjoy elaborate entertainments and enjoy elaborate fictional universes, video games and whatnot, and find all the hidden treasures and all of them, means that why not make our spiritual practices attractive in the same way, so that we can become deeply absorbed in the complexity. Because for many people, the complexity of a craft project, or the complexity of a novel, or the complexity of an entertainment is absorbing for them. They become lost in it. They can really be part of it. And so it stands to reason that our spiritual practices could be just as complex and compelling. But if all of this idea of a seed syllable sending light rays and so forth is a little too difficult, you can skip that step and merely begin as instantly being the medicine Buddha and instantly seeing the medicine Buddha in front of you. That makes it super easy. So we'll have to stop here for this morning. But when we pick up this afternoon at 1:30 Eastern time, we'll pick up right here and talk about how we make offerings to the front medicine Buddha and how we accumulate merit through that. How we accumulate merit by doing all of the sort of wonderful offerings, bathing, washing, and so forth. We imagine that we bathe the Buddhas and wash them, and it's quite a lovely practice in which we will accumulate a great deal of merit. So we'll talk about that this afternoon. So we'll stop here for now, and I'll do a short dedication of merit, and I will try to send an email instantly with the links to the both the sadhana practice and to the outline. So we'll gather together all of our merit and say, we dedicate this merit to all sentient beings. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everyone. And do feel welcome to jotting down other questions you might have, and then we'll pick them up this afternoon. So thanks, everyone. Om Mani Padme Hum.